Okay, for this particular video, I will throw in a qualifier, and that is ever since I was a little kid, I realized the differences among us. So if I am what love is and you are what love is, then we're both thriving. Ourselves are happy and joyful in spirit, right? Okay, so there's your journey, my journey. I have an absolute aversion to telling people what to do. Okay, just like when I was when was that, up in Josephine County, when I was hired to run a 20-man firefighting crew and had a bulldozer, a helicopter, and some other stuff that was available to us to work on a contract basis with the federal and state and county fire authorities. Okay, and so one of the things that I did with the crew that I hired was to let them know, listen, I'm equal unto all of you, but because of the way this system works, right, you have an authority figure. So because of all the experience that I've had, chances are you're all going to come back in a state of happy and joyfulness if we go out together, because I'm very aware of what's going on when I'm out there with the spirit of fire, right? Because there's a big spirit of fire in me, right? So I know how to communicate with the spirit of fire, slow it down, maybe even pull some rain in here, about some clouds, right? Bring up the fuel moisture, right? Bring up the moisture content, slow it down a little bit, maybe bring it down to where it can't sustain its own combustion. You know, we know how to do that. Matter of fact, there are other things we know how to do. Hey, you see that fire burning through that fort? Let's just turn it off. Oh, you just want to turn it on? Yeah, just dial it down. Oh, well, you put that fire out using a dial tone. Yep. Okay, so here's something I wanted to share about exercises in basic math logic. Logos, three spheres. Binary coded vectors going east and west, north and south. Okay? Binary coded vectors are not compatible. The vesica piscis with Gaia's three wave spheres, the lotus breath of Kemaloati, is not compatible with heart and soul based consciousness. It's not compatible. Dead light energy is not compatible with us. Okay? That's their beast technology. Okay? 666, right? I put up that other little deal. So I made some other notes because this morning, and this wasn't a coincidence, there is a channel I've mentioned before whose name is Christopher V. Comstock, YouTube channel, okay, on 7/7/2023. The title is Personal and Group Disclaimer. And if you go about 4 minutes in, right around there, he talks about some of the material and information that came out by the Guardians back around 2011. Now, for me, that was an important date. I'm not going to cite all the other videos I've did about certain things that I experienced based on dates and timestamps. But yeah, 2011, and quote unquote, self-healing and nothing else. And then I was immediately reminded, hey, Patty Broussard, wasn't it a few years ago and you talked about doing the inner work? And I've certainly talked about the inner work. So I wrote a little comment up there because this was a critical remark in terms of being co-dependent rather than mutual co-creation. Remember the Emerald Covenant, Paladorian, right? The agreement was to get along in co-creation with the Grand Creator or the Christic Spiral. Their beast technology, their -13 Metatronic cube, which is their QI, which is their binary, is incompatible with us, right? And so that is your anti-Christic consciousness spiral, known as the phantom time zones, which is finite deadlight energy, which means it has a given shelf life, otherwise known as a Bartow point, where the quantum probability function can tell you, bye. That's why they know this is the final dance. So I was reminded of this because I've mentioned this in a couple other videos, like when I came back from the island of Kauai, and I had major bruising, of my battery packs, directed energy consciousness weapons, right? And in about 6 days, I managed to heal myself. So we know how to do that. Not the least of which is who we are connected with, the One, Mama, and other sacred temples of sacred living spirits that are experiencing what love is in them, that we experience in us, because we're always gifting love. And that's what heals us. So that's one of the reasons why I love this man. I don't know how to pronounce his Vietnamese name because it's long, but he's in Plum Village. If you go to Plum Village, and there was a video that he did about learning or knowing how to love yourself. And he said something that was so beautiful, which sort of echoes a lot of stuff that I've shared when he talked about communicating with your inner soul, your inner true self, your inner cells, all the units of consciousness that represent the mineral kingdom, the water worlds, right? All the elementals that we are communicating, that are experiencing we are, and living spirit, which is the breath of Kamaloati. We are experiencing what love is in us, that we're giving love to you. That's how I was healing myself. I had a very relaxed conversation in the privacy of a Ford Explorer, lying flat on my back in a rest stop. And for about 15 minutes, I had a night of calm, cool relaxation, putting both my hands over my heart and my soul with my spiritual essence, and had a communication with the one I'm with, using the purest of light, which is the purest of love, to heal every cell, to heal every organ, to heal every nerve fiber, so that I'm experiencing perfect balance again, so that I could continue to do the work that I do without interference. No interference signals. Not trying to break the plasma wave of acoustic spiral. So why was it critical about codependent on dead light energy healing technologies? Well, I've mentioned this before, that I don't, because I'm a Manu era and I'm hyper sensitive, I don't want to say anything that might ruffle your feathers, okay? Because of what you choose to experience that I may not choose to experience, because of how I do things versus how you do things. And you are always free to do whatever you want, right? That way I don't have to worry about you, right? Because otherwise, do I got to build a fence to make sure you're not in there? There is a natural way that consciousness, when you're with the one, naturally has a firewall, because of the speed at which our atoms vibrate, right, as accelerators. And when you're experiencing the first accelerator, which is the first sound breath, the first sound magician, right, the first Kamaloati, right, Kirasha, right, the Maharata shield, Alhambra, right? Then you are naturally protecting everything that you're giving love to, which includes ourselves. So if I'm doing well, then you're experiencing the wellness and the spirit integrated with my soul you're experiencing in you. And that allows you to be able to experience less resistance, to experience a greater expansion in your own consciousness of experiencing what I am, which is what love is, that you experience in your heart and soul, which is what love is. Because that's the one's frequency. That's the genius frequency, see? So when we know how to do the inner work this way, We are healing ourselves from within ourselves. We're healing ourselves with the one we're with, which is the crystal spiral. So I did a video on that about technology, what I call adjuncts. It's much in the same way, like having to go to them to get what it is that they have that they're selling. So now we got to use our electrons when we're the accelerators, the first accelerator. We're having to use our electrons as the highest speed accelerators to go to them that are inverters, to then get at what it is that they produce and then sell back to us, right, in order to help or heal ourselves through whatever means in which it's now being sold back to us, because that's what it is. We're the solar source from which what they produce as technologies through their beast system that we thus have a codependent relationship with. That's a codependent relationship with their spiral. Not letting go of that spiral. Because this means staying connected to the units of consciousness, to the souls that are still running that spiral, because they're not letting go of that spiral by virtue of the reality that we've been experiencing as a result of that technology. Okay? So this is one of the reasons for the last couple of years I've spent a lot of time in solitude, where it's just me and the rest of the cosmos, but I'm in places where I'm experiencing, in other words, the one signal, mama's signals, are not being overwritten. That's unlawful. That is not lawful to override mama's signal. It is not lawful to mute the mic of the one. They don't care. Obviously, because of why we're here now. Anti-Christic consciousness, right, does anti-Christic consciousness things that we experience in us. That's why Christopher mentioned about how their spiral sort of bounce backs on them. That's one of the reasons that they hate us. It's much like the way that you would, when that guy came out on that little video who was in the military as a, you know how it is with military organizations, right? If you break down the whole military organization, you got the, like on a chessboard, because it's checkerboard square, playing a binary ping pong game, because you all know what a bipolar disorder is, right? Polar opposites, polar extremes, and then what it's like to experience, hey, I'm fully integrated, right? Now you're one blast furnace, magnet, a pole, a single pole, a monad, monoera. Now you're with one. Now you're experiencing the full electromagnetic spectrum of all the frequencies that are available to the one. Now that you're with one, now you're experiencing eternal creation, angelic realities. So that's surrender to the one, to experience the purest of eternal absolute love. So when he mentioned that, and he talked about the guardians had mentioned that to them, bang, he's right. He's right. I've tried to let some of that stuff go out there in a very subtle way, because I'm not saying don't do this, don't do that. I don't. It's just that you choose to do that. You do that of your own free choice, and that's up to you. And I hope that you benefit from it for the reasons that you're wanting to use it, inspecting your electrons, buying it through them, and which to experience the result. Versus how, as I've mentioned many times, I have not had the ability to do that because I'm not in places where I can get things mailed to me. And I normally do not spend a lot of my electrons wanting to stay at this level of density. It's about accelerating the giving away of all the electrons to not experience any mass at all, so that you pre-phase. Instead of being phase locked into a system that's running a spiral that is a Death Star. That's what it is. So they were attempting, right, We're the knowable planet, which is why Cosmino Council, okay, intervened on behalf with the one, right, which is failsafe plasma. That's a crystal spiral. So now you're experiencing the perfect balance between the poles within your own hemispheres. At the center point of balance that you experience yourself, atoms that are experiencing themselves, which is what we are, which is what love is. It goes on forever, experiencing perfect balance. Atoms love to be in perfect balance in the exchange, right, of energy. Okay? Between metabolic rates, right, your basal metabolic rate, right, and getting rid of waste product. How fast you're getting rid of waste product, in which you're not experiencing any feedback, in which you're losing speed. Whoa. That is a high speed. That's hyperspace. That's hyperspeed. Right? That's fully in space and time, as if you haven't left the single point from which it all began. Well, I'm everywhere at once. Everything that is happening simultaneously is everywhere the one is. Yeah. And that's what makes it so simple as a little kid, right? And how, when I realized as a little kid, when I was 6 years of age, I mentioned this till I'm blue in the face about all the technologies that I became aware of that were being used in this time and density that was being introduced that we thus experienced, right? That was obsolete before they ever introduced it. So it's like, why would you want to spend time and energy on developing an idea in which it's already obsolete before you started? In other words, you're just wasting your time and energy. Now you get into technology and technology transfer, and now you're getting into secrets. It's much like when I was a kid, and I said, if I develop something, they find out about it, you know they're going to confiscate it, kill me, steal it. Now we're back into alliances between different units of consciousness that form formations of consciousness, right? As a result of, wow, look at the device that you got. What do you want to trade for this, right? And now you get into what's called competition between technologies. Well, I'm moving at a higher rate of speed than you are, and developing what it is that I can do versus what you're way behind. Now you're into the acceleration of learning, the acceleration of the learning curve potential, and how fast you're moving through the cosmos in perpetual motion with your state of consciousness, which is your soul. Right? So this is when you get into co-creation versus codependent. And what it's like to feel free, which means you're not held captive by nothing. Right? That's no memory. That's no batteries required. Right? Much like when I was a little kid. Hey, I can't take this vehicle with me. I can't take that pogo stick with me, that hula hoop with me, that skateboard with me, that boogie board with me, that house. I can't take that with me. I came in here all by my lonesome, spirit and soul, right? Psh, much like Dante's story had that beautiful little image where you see it, and then all of a sudden you see a line and just go, well, it's gone. Where'd it go? In and out. Well, now I'm here, now I'm not. Right? Now you see me, now you don't. Breathing in and out. The breath of aloha. Aloha to you. So I thought that was important because I'll say it a second time. The video was 7/7/2023. Personal and group disclaimer. Christopher V. Comstock YouTube channel. 4 minutes in. Self-healing and nothing else. That's like that message from the Guardian saying, don't have a codependent relationship with them using those technologies, which means you now have a relationship with deadlight magnets. Their system, now you're becoming dependent on those technologies because you're not learning how to do it yourself on your own. Right? And now we're back to doing the inner work, right? Particularly when you realize, and he mentioned this, about the shifts that are taking place and the speed at which events are actually happening simultaneously, right? And how their spiral, right, keeps knocking on that door, right? I experience it all the time, but it's just like water off a duck, right? That's your spiral. That's not our spiral. That's we're Christic consciousness, why we're all here. And so, yeah, so how to flip right side up an inverted triangle. I wrote this down. And I probably do a separate video on that, although I'm trying to limit the amount of time I even spend on this phone anymore. I did some rather unorthodox, to a lot of folks, I realize this would be a very unorthodox way, or if you will, the way that what's called a methodology, the method that you're using to work with somebody in which to bring them back so they can experience what's been muted in their DNA. I do know how to do that. Okay. I know how to unmute a mic. I was able to do that with Misha. That's why that occurred. I left that on the record. That's like when you think of infinite possibilities, when you know that the one makes everything possible. So when I'm with the one, and I was with the one, and I was with Misha, Misha experienced the one. That's why she bawled like a little child and wanted to let it all go. And she was within a fractal of releasing it all. Because, you know, when you're with one, the first crystic spiral, we can transmute it. That's a lot to transmute, but we can transmute it as a polarity integrator over. So a polarity integrator can translate that, can transmute that, right? Transfer it, all of it. Which is say, in other words, transfer all that dark essence. We'll burn it off. That's what it is. And return it. That's a purifier. It's really what it is. Purify it. Purify it. And that's what we do. That's a purifier. That's the one you're with, right? Yeah. And so I put this down, how to flip the right side up an inverted triangle to experience being one with one, experiencing purified love on fire. The intensity. You know what intensity is? Fire intensity. The intensity of that direct sound and light field. The EFFI mono era. So then I wrote down this. The density plasma waves, original software radio star burst, FM frequency modulation, cosmic level avatar, hyperspeed, hyperneuron, sensory receptors, folding math, and geometric time space, density wave. A density wave. The one-dimensional half of a circle, right, with a vertical line. The other side, right? Discs. And so what was the last one I wrote here? Anti-Christic consciousness, reversal plasma wave, distortions. To break the signal of Christic consciousness, atom silver-seeded, first cell wave. Form, eternal, absolute, pure love. Spiral, plasma wave. Form, balanced consciousness. Yeah, I'll do it this way. That's what it is. Going deep into your heart. I've suggested a number of ways that you can do it on other videos that I've done, like what I do out here. I take my feet off, I plant them on the ground, I'll breathe with the tree, breathing with the sun, the mirror in the sky, and I'll be breathing and letting all that love go, letting all that love go. I love you all, I love you all, I love you all. And then not saying a word, but giving the command, let it flow, let it flow, let all that light flow, let all that light flow, let all that light flow. Through every cell, through every neuron, through every molecule of water, every thermal gradient, through every software system, through every unit of consciousness, through every molecular bond, experience what I am, experience what love is, and letting it flow, and being silent, and allowing the still point of your heart and your soul, experiencing the one and letting it flow. I did that yesterday afternoon with the sun, and addressed everybody here. Thank you for all of you that are here. You know why I'm here. I'm here on behalf of all of us, which is all of you that are here, and began to feel the love and joy, the tears of love and joy in my heart, experiencing that. And then when I came back in the house, all of a sudden it's like, man, I just kicked something up a notch. It's like the router speed just went, the meter on the needle, it kicked into a little bit of a higher gear. Gearheads? No, gearheads. Gear, gearheads, General Electric arcing. I know, Mama. And so I wanted to share that, because I try not to say things that are that use any sort of fear-based or using the words like intimidation, or if I don't do this, that's not what I do. It's very simple in a non-reactive state. I simply, as I've always said on my videos, I share what I've learned as a result of experience. Experience is feedback. That's information. You're being informed in the use of our energy, what we're going to experience as a result, because we take personal responsibility in the use of our energy, of what we experience by virtue of what that result gives back to us. Okay? And so therefore, you have free choices. Those choices are up to you. However, if I become aware of something, okay, that I become aware of why I'm supposed to become aware of it, because the information is important, particularly as it relates to healing, and particularly as it relates to what I'm aware of where we're at right now. But whether or not that has importance to what you're aware of, at least you've become aware of it. That's why I do it, which means I'm allowing others to become aware of what I'm aware of in a non-reactive state, so that you can decide what it is of your own free choice, what you're going to do with that information. I'm now aware of what he's aware of. Okay. And then you're going to experience something else after that, right? Or it could be, he's right, because you know that. You know it within your own heart and soul. If you know it within your own heart and soul, then you'll know it. Then your own heart and soul will acknowledge what my soul does, right? I mean, that's how it works. You know, right? Unknown knowns, known knowns. What was his name? That buffoonery guy that was the defense secretary. Bless your heart too, Mr. Rumsfeld. Yeah, his name was Rumsfeld. You know, the shock and awe folks. Remember he came out on a briefing. You know, I never listened to a lot of things that he said, but I was supposed to experience that. But I knew exactly what he meant when he said unknown knowns. You know how that works with security protocols, right? So I wanted to share this because I wouldn't have experienced it if I wasn't supposed to experience it. And then as a result of that experience, I realized the importance that it had, because when he talked about 2011, he talked about self-healing. I went, yeah. And you can see how you can cross-index that to other encrypted information that others are sharing, that you go, yeah. You may use different words, but the meaning and the application of our energy is really the same thing, which is doing the inner work with our heart and our soul and our Creator, by virtue of what we know we're experiencing now that is changing at a higher rate of speed now than it was before. And that means the atomic rate of speed is rising. Mama's rising. Christic River host. River, atmospheric rivers. Atmospheric consciousness. Pressure-sensitive information. Hypersensitive information. Right? Hypersensitive visuals. Hypersensitive math. Hypersensitive numbers. Yeah. Playing number games. Game players, which are head gamers, right? I was very fortunate to know this as a child. These are head gamers. Gaming for your soul's energy. trap it into a system that you can't escape. Whoa, I'm running the one spiral. I know, Mama. So anyway, have a beautiful day. The sun is out, right? Take care of yourselves. We love you all. Mwah.